Welcome to another one of my video blogs. I'm author and Ghostorian Mike Ricksecker. What I'm going to talk about today is what it means to be a Ghostorian. I know it's a new term that a lot of people haven't heard. I've had a lot of questions about what is a Ghostorian, what is it you do, and it's really two words put together, ghost and historian. So ghost historian, Ghostorian. And basically the way I define that is a Ghostorian is a person who investigates and researches a ghost in the place in which it haunts. So if I'm going to a historic home, even a residence, basically I will research that home, that historic location, the residence, building, could be an abandoned church, heck, even a field somewhere, a battlefield even. I'm going to dive into the people that were there. There's a reason why that person is haunting that location, if it does turn out that the place is haunted. So I will dive into the history through a number of different means, really. I'll go through archives, census records, old newspaper clippings, property deeds. There's a lot of tools at the disposal of a paranormal investigator or a Ghostorian to be able to research and find those people and discover, why a certain place may be haunted, why a certain spirit or ghost is haunting a location. What is it that they're looking for? Why is it that they're there? And a lot of times, what you'll find is that, there's a real personable, humanistic tale to that. It's not just, knocking on doors and doors opening or things falling over, or, you see on a lot of the shows, people are out there saying, make a noise, hit me. That's one that always gets me, hit me. I get what they're trying to do, but do you walk into a person's home and say, hey, come out and hit me? No, usually you don't. Usually I walk into somebody's home, and if this is the first time we're meeting especially, I hold up my hand and say, hi, I'm Mike Ricksecker, how are you? And I will actually do that when I am investigating a home. I will introduce myself. I don't just walk in and start saying, hey, make a noise, knock something over, slam the door. I won't do that. I actually introduce myself first, because usually what is there, if there is a ghost or spirit that is there, usually it's something that had been human once in its life. So, because you hear the stories, you hear the tales from people of what's going on in the home, and some of that is really happening. Some of it could be explained by other things going on in the home. You don't know. So I'm going to take the approach that, hey, I'm Mike Ricksecker. I'm a nice guy. I'm courteous. I have manners. My mother taught me well. I'm going to go in, hold up my hand, introduce myself. Now, as far as the research and diving into the history of those locations as a Ghostorian, I'll give a couple examples that I usually like to talk about, how this really works for me. The first is Mount Airy Mansion in Rosaryville Park in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. And when I was first researching that home, I came across a little one-liner of a haunting there. And basically, it said that there was a ghost of a young woman who was forlorn and depressed over losing her love, the love of her life. And yeah, I was going to include that in my book, Ghosts of Maryland, but it was too vague. I wanted to find out exactly who this girl was. Is there more that I can find out about her? And so as I was continuing my research of the mansion, I came across a story in an old book. It was Colonial Homes of Maryland and Delaware. Early 1900s, I think it might have been 1914, something like that, 1911, 1914, somewhere in there. I don't recall the author offhand, but you can find it, Colonial Homes of Maryland and Delaware. As I was going through the story in this book about Mount Airy Mansion, I came across the story of Ariana Calvert. Now, the Calverts were a very prominent family of Maryland. They basically founded the state. They were the Lords of Baltimore. They're so prominent, in fact, that George Washington's stepson married into the family. They had a 2-week wedding party. George and Martha were there. It was a big deal. So very, very influential family. Now, years after that, Ariana was born to the family, and her father, Benedict, was very controlling. Ariana had been seeing this boy near the home, a young man, and she was in love with him, he was in love with her. Benedict, however, did not like the young man and basically told Ariana that she was forbidden from seeing him. Well, upon this, Ariana fell into a deep, deep depression. She kept wanting to see him. That's all she talked about. That's all she wanted to do was be with this boy. Well, after a time, Benedict grew weary of this and sent Ariana away to her sisters in Annapolis. Now, her sisters, tried to cheer her up. They tried to get her to court other men. They had suitors call upon Ariana, but she turned every single one of them away. And she grew more and more depressed to the point that she became very ill. Now, during this time, Benedict also grew ill and passed away. And after he did, the mother, upon seeing Ariana, took pity upon her and invited her back to the home. However, it was too late for Ariana to be courted by the boy because she ended up dying and passing away from her depression. So it's a very sad tale, but it's very human as well. And that's something as a Ghostorian that I try to dive into and research and pull out of, these little one-liners that you might find on the internet somewhere. It's not about just bangs and knocks and, seeing an apparition walk down the hall or something like that. We're talking about people that once lived and once had a life. I like to dive into their story, about their history, about who they were, about what they were like. Because most of these spirits that we're dealing with on these investigations, if we so deem that there is a real spirit involved, most of the time they were humans at one point in time. And so they have a history, they have a story. And I like to discover what that is. Another thing that I like to do as a Ghostorian in what I do with my research is to find the real truth behind myths and legends of different hauntings. Ariana Calvert wasn't so much a myth or a legend as it was an incomplete story. However, something like the legend of Effie at the Skirvin Hotel in downtown Oklahoma City is more of a legend. Now, as the story goes, the owner of the Skirvin Hotel, William Skirvin, had taken up with a chambermaid named Effie and got her pregnant. She had his child, but because it would have been a controversy at that time in the early 1900s, he basically hid her away in the top floor suite of the Skirvin Hotel. Now, as she was taking care of the baby and being secluded, she had postpartum depression, all of that, Effie grew depressed, took the baby in her arms, and jumped out of the top story window of the Skirvin Hotel, both mother and baby falling to their death. That's the legend. However, there's a problem with that legend. There is no record of an Effie as a chambermaid having worked at the Skirvin Hotel. There is no record of a woman or a woman and her baby falling to their death from the top story window of the Skirvin Hotel. It doesn't exist. So where did this legend of Effie come from? It had to have come from somewhere. And as a Ghostorian, that's where the research of the history of the hotel comes into play. Now, there was a salesman, a traveling salesman from Dallas, who jumped out of the window of the Skirvin Hotel. And at the time that he did, and this was the early 1930s, at that time that he jumped out of that window, it was not the top story window. However, a couple years beforehand, it actually was. So there's a little bit of a play in time there where the story window that he jumped out of at one time had been the top story. He did fall to his death, of course. Now, as far as a woman jumping out of a hotel window at the Skirvin, the closest one that I can find was later that decade, later 1930s, where there was a drunken woman who did try to jump out of one of the windows, but she was saved by one of the security personnel before she was able to do so. So she did not fall to her death, and she was charged like $11 for disorderly conduct or drunkenness or something like that. So still no record of, an Effie or a woman falling to her death, and no baby whatsoever. So where does the report of a baby come from, and where does the chambermaid come from? Well, there have been a number of reports of hauntings in the Skirvin Hotel, of the sounds of babies crying up and down the hallways, a disembodied baby's cry. As far as the chambermaid, there have been a number of times that the ghostly apparitions of chambermaids have been seen. Sometimes the sound of a maid's cart going up and down the hallway when there is none. Different women, ghosts and apparitions being reported in some of the different rooms. So the story of Effie, it seems, is a conglomeration of all of these different tales into one legend. And that's something that I enjoy doing as a Ghostorian, is, years and years later, it's become this, legend of Effie. Even though we can't find her, there's some truth in there to where the story came from, and it's a matter of dissecting it and picking it apart. Yeah, there's some tales and myths and all these different things that have been piled on top of it over the years, and that happens with a lot of ghost tales and just local legends and urban legends, mythology, the works. But that's what I enjoy. Is it's kind of a mystery, almost like a puzzle, or tearing apart an elaborate puzzle that's been pieced together to find out, what is the original truth of the entire matter. And it might be a couple different things thrown together, like the story with Effie is more than likely a number of different things put together to have one story now. Now that you have an idea what a Ghostorian is and what a Ghostorian does, I'd like to introduce you to the Ghostorian case files. The first one is The Inscription of Evil Times. This is going to be released very soon as a small book. It contains a number of exhibits of a case, and I'm not going to dive into very many details right now. I'd like to leave that as a mystery for you to discover and uncover, but that will be out before Halloween 2013. So thank you for joining me for another one of my video blogs about being a Ghostorian. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Until next time.